And shortly after that subcommittee hearing, the Pentagon released its latest report on UFOs. It looked at hundreds of reported sightings, but found no evidence that any of those objects were from another planet. While UFO conspiracy theories have seeped into every corner of our culture, people are obsessed with the subject, and our next two guests are no exceptions. Space nerds? Can I say that?
I'll go with space nerd. I love it.
I mean, at the very least, UFO nerds.
Okay, yeah. UFO nerds. Lee Kunla and Nathan Radke are here, co-hosts of the Uncover Up podcast, which delves into the world of conspiracies. They're also professors at Humber College. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, why are we so dang fascinated with UFO conspiracies? Nathan, let me come to you.
I mean, we love a puzzle. And the thing about trying to figure out the UFO situation, imagine trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle where all of the pieces keep changing shape and size.
Okay.
And that's sort of what we're looking at with UFOs, unfortunately. I mean, it's interesting, it's fascinating, but it's also very frustrating. And part of this is because, I mean, from the very beginning of the UFO situation, 1947, almost immediately, we see scams, we see government cover-ups, we see misinformation, we see disinformation. To try to work our way through that, it's challenging, it's interesting. I would argue it's important, but it's also extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add?
Well, no, I would totally agree, but I think also there's just something mysterious about the fact that there might be other life out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's just one of those big questions. Are we alone in the universe? So I totally get just why somebody would be interested in that to begin with. And then I think there's really compelling sightings. I think when I first looked into the subject as a kind of a skeptic, I thought all of it was going to be easy to explain away. It was maybe a little silly, and the rest of it was in some area of belief that you can't really investigate.
It was going to be weather balloons.
Exactly.
But
and
it's
then
not.
you look into it,
It's not.
and there's very credible sightings by a lot of people that have been investigated where the conclusions are ambiguous. There are then scams that are laid on top of it. So I think I've certainly become really fascinated by it.
And sometimes like government gaslighting, where it's like
Oh,
we
for
don't
sure,
say anything
exactly.
or we like hold back information, and people it just builds to that. You know, in Canada, UFO fever is in Shag Harbor, right? A small fishing village in Nova Scotia where an alleged sighting of a UFO where something crashed into the water back in 1967. Was it a UFO? Was it the Soviets? Was it military? We just don't know. Lots of theories out there. Now there's a full interpretive center. People go out there. They're so fascinated by it. What is the harm, Lee, in believing any of those theories?
You know, I think that there's a lot of good that can come out of just being questioning and open to, you know, different interpretations of the data. So I think the question itself is not harmful. There are very serious investigators, scientific institutions. There's the SETI research project that, you know, is really asking this question. I do think, though, that once we enter a world in which we leave evidence-based theories and we get into stuff that is highly speculative and are no longer questioning but quite certain about the interpretations, we find ourselves in a place where we can really be taken advantage of. You know, I rarely argue about my work, but when I do, it's on this question, where people say to me, like, you know, what is the problem if I have this kind of belief? And it's, I think, the belief part where the investigation is not a problem, the being open to new evidence is not a problem, but being certain that you have the right answer, that you have a theory that explains how everything is going down in the world, that really does leave people open to a deep manipulation that we're seeing across the board.
I mean, the thing is, there's a cliche that you are what you eat. But I think if you look at it, if you can change what somebody thinks, then you can change their worldview. If you change their worldview, you're changing how they behave. And if you change how they behave, you're changing who they are. So I think it makes more sense to say you are what you think. Somebody changes what you think, changes how you see the world, changes what you do, and they change who you are. If you do it enough, you can actually change the culture. And the CIA in the early 1950s, they were extremely concerned about the UFO situation. Not because they thought it was perhaps extraterrestrial, but they thought it was maybe Soviet. They thought that maybe this whole flying saucer phenomenon was some kind of elaborate Soviet psyop. And they were interested in knowing, how can we prevent the Soviets from doing this to us? But the CIA was also very curious, how could we maybe use this ourselves as a kind of psyop weapon?
I heard the word scams. So I'm curious as to, how are people being exploited right now, Nathan?
Well, I mean, this has been going on again since the very beginning. Only a couple weeks after that first Kenneth Arnold sighting, there were people trying to sell fake stories to newspapers just for profit and things like that. And this has been going on for decades. There was the contactee movement in the 60s where people claimed that they had made contact with aliens from Venus. And then, of course, they had books to sell and they had speaking tours to sell and that kind of thing. So that's one aspect of it, but it can also become more sinister than that. In the 1970s, there was a researcher named Jacques Vallée who went and looked at UFO cults. And he came away extremely concerned about the way that these people could be manipulated through their beliefs. And tragically, one of those cults that Vallée was investigating turned out eventually to be called Heaven's Gate. And of course, we know what happened with that organization.
Tell us a little bit.
So Heaven's Gate was a movement that started in the late 60s and 70s. There were two people who claimed to be aliens, claimed to be just vehicles for alien beings. And because they were selling the idea, which is always an easy sell, that life is hard, that this world can be lonely, that it seems like something is terribly wrong here, and they offered a solution. And the solution is that the believers would be taken away to a better place in a flying saucer. And for years and years, they kept making promises, didn't come true, it didn't matter. The believers, they held on to that belief until it got to the point where, tragically, the remaining leaders said, it isn't a question of the flying saucer landing here. We have to go to the flying saucer. And the way to do that was abandoning your body. And the way to do that, tragically, was taking your own life.
Wow. So the harms can be,
Life and death.
horrific, life and death. I also think of the scams in the day-to-day. Like, what are people selling out there?
I mean, it really runs the gamut. And I think that the scams are of varying qualities. I mean, some of them are just people trying to get publicity. And then some of them are really pernicious and awful when, for example, they are selling potential medical devices that don't work.
Like?
Like med beds.
What are med beds?
So these are, they don't exist. That's the first thing that needs to be said on a show like this.
They exist in pop culture.
They exist in pop culture, and there's a lot of science fiction that narrates these ideas where there is a bed that has some kind of alien technology, most likely, that will be able to heal all kinds of diseases or illnesses, even to the point of growing back limbs, for example, fixing quote-unquote DNA, curing cancer, curing a whole bunch of currently incurable diseases.
A miracle machine, which
Exactly.
our viewers just saw a clip of Elysium, which is, this
Right.
movie that
Exactly.
shows that kind of concept.
Yes.
The kid goes in, has leukemia, whoop, cured.
Well, and exactly that is, I think, where the rubber really hits the road when you're dealing with people who have a sick child. And you're desperate for that child to get better. And in some cases, there are going to be diagnoses that are not optimistic or hopeful. And as a parent myself, I know how desperate I would be in a situation like that. And if somebody came around and said, listen, there's technology out there that will save your child's life if you just fork over a certain amount of money, I think I would try it even if I was, kind of skeptical about it.
It makes sense because anyone would have that desperation. I guess my question is, is there something underlying for people that believe in these things?
Well, I mean, the problem is that when you're trying to deal with something like healthcare, it's extremely difficult, it can be extremely frustrating, it can be extremely alienating. And when somebody is in that state, when they are frustrated, when they're alienated, they're terrified, their brain is scrambling around for possible solutions. And it's in those moments where a parasitic scammer will target a person like that and move in on them for the exact purpose of trying to take advantage of those very real feelings that they're having by providing a fictional cure to the real condition.
So who is doing that in Canada when we talk about med beds?
There are a number of organizations. I think, for example, the supposed Queen of Canada, Romana Didelot, is one of the groups that is offering this. Her group is one that is making these claims about this technology is just around the corner, or we are in possession of this technology, send us money, you're getting in on the ground floor.
So who is the Queen of Canada?
Romana Didelot is a social media influencer who claims to be an Arcturian alien and who also makes pronouncements and laws that she considers to be the true laws of Canada, and she pushes technologies such as medbeds to her followers.
Yeah, people just saw a picture of her, and she claims to be an alien herself.
Right.
An Arcturian, to be specific.
Right. And sorry to interrupt, but this is also not that unusual that people in these scenes, and I'm going to just call them scammers, will generate a lineage that gives them some kind of authority because they have revealed knowledge from somewhere.
So what do we do? What do we do when there's scams like this out there, med beds that are attracting people? I mean, I think of even our universal healthcare system in Canada. People do have basic access, but we've seen in the last few years that has been frustrated for so many people. Many people don't even have a family doctor. So this can in some ways get them, but how do we help people?
I mean, the first thing is to start from a position of sympathy. The temptation when someone has a belief that we consider to be ridiculous is to remember, first of all, be a bit humble about it and realize that we also probably believe a bunch of ridiculous things. But the underlying feelings behind that belief are real. The underlying frustration and fear. And if you think about the situation that everyone's been in for the last few years with pandemic, with lockdown, with these unprecedented measures that were taken and the constant state of fear, like people were kind of primed for this kind of scam. So the very first thing that we have to do, and especially if you have a loved one who you feel you're starting to lose down the rabbit hole of scammy conspiracies, is to find common ground. Figure out, why do they feel this way? Where are some areas that you can agree? Where are some things some touchstones that you can meet on? And from there, I mean, you can never, the temptation is to mock, unfortunately, but it's the exact opposite of what you should do. No one's ever been mocked into changing their belief.
Right. Stay in relationship and stay talking to those people.
But also, I think at the root of a lot of this is some kind of personal pain or trauma. And the reason that not just mocking, but I hate to say this as somebody who has dedicated their life to reason and education, just coming with a lot of facts also tends not to be very effective because it doesn't address the pain and the frustration that's often underlying, the real underlying motivation to it.
Empathy, empathy, empathy,
Exactly.
keep talking.
Yeah.
Nathan, Lee, I could talk to you all day, but great to have you on the program today.
Thanks for having us on.